Welcome to the 2010 Fusion Podcast, presented to you by the Oregon Ministry Network. Fusion took place November 4th through 6th at People's Church in Salem. The following workshop, entitled Money Talks, was led by Jeremy Stamback.
As I was thinking about this, I was trying to think, okay, what book should I take their principles and, yada. So I took this from my perspective of, I'm not good with the books that say 25 things you need to master. I'm like, you know what? You lost me at the title. So I tried to hone in and say, what are just some things that I've done in my life that have made all the world of difference? And as I began to think about it, I began to think there's really two things that I could say, and I don't know if I can take credit for doing, but there's two things. And I just kind of likened it to two focuses that we have to have if we're going to see clearly our financial, our perspective, the right perspective on how God, and this is not my input, this is really just taken from Scripture, my understanding of Scripture of how we're supposed to deal with our finances. And so I'll just have you write in there, focus number one. I thought it really all starts with honoring God in our finances. And, I think you would understand that. But Proverbs 3, verse 9 says, honor the Lord with your wealth. And, you could take that word wealth, and all of us could say, well, we're not wealthy, so that doesn't apply. But really, just if you honor God with your finances, I really believe He'll honor us back. And one of the recommended readings I gave you is this book called The Blessed Life. It was some of the most fabulous, personally challenging book I've ever read on giving. It's actually a book that as I read, I got excited about the act of giving. And I don't know if I've ever read a book that did that to me before. And he has a section in here, and it's called The Illustration of Caring for God's Bride. And he basically takes the story of the stewards. I mean, you guys know that scripture. But his principle is, if we care about what God cares about, why would God not fund that fully and more? And the illustration is this, that if we go on if I go on a journey and I choose three people for a responsibility, and I say that I'm going to give every one of these people $10,000 a month, I'm going to send that to them while I'm on my journey, and their responsibility is they can use $9,000 of that, and $1,000 of that has to go back to my family. They're going to take care of my family for me while I'm gone. Well, when I call back to my wife and say, how's everything going, and is everything working out the way I planned, and she gives me a report that, well, the first guy, he's giving me $1,000 a month just as you instructed him. The second guy is actually giving me $2,000 a month, much more than you instructed. And the third guy, he started giving me $1,000, and the next month it was $500, and now we haven't been getting anything from him. His principle is, which of those am I going to say, well, wait a minute, I wanted this to take care of my family. Which of those am I going to then take my money and give to? Well, it's the one that takes care of my family. And a powerful illustration that if we take care of what God is all about, why would God not bless us? And so if we honor God with our finances, we understand as pastors and leaders, we've probably taught this many, many times. Sometimes it becomes a little harder to apply then. And let me just ask, because there's many ways that we can honor God with our finances, but what are some of the ways? And this is kind of the how-to. Give us some things that we can take away and that are how-tos. How do we honor God with our finances?
Tithe and offering,
yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah. I'll hit on that in just a minute.
Okay.
Because I will give you a good breakdown of something I was challenged by out of these books.
Stewardship. I mean, really, every time I get in my car, I remind myself this is God's car, and He's trusted me to drive it.
Yeah.
And God's pushed us along as a family where He's trusted us to drive it, where it's paid for as well. I'm like, so every day when you drive a vehicle that's paid for, it's more like that's an extra blessing. That's even a bigger blessing, that vehicle runs and all that. So we're excited, but we've just always raised our kids too to realize good stewardship over things, and being faithful and diligent in managing this little thing. God's going to start to give you more things to be managing over, and they start to see that, they catch that principle as well.
And I think that applies to finances as well as it applies to every other thing. I mean, our time. Are we good stewards of our time? As you were saying, the 7 project equipment has been well used. So you were saying, hey, we're going to steward what we have and leverage it to the max possibility. So stewardship is a key part of how we honor God with our finances. Other thoughts? Brian, we're talking about 2 focuses in how we manage money. And the first is honoring God. Everything happens out of honoring God with our... and so we're just talking about ways that we honor God with our finances.
Well, I think in a way to realize that our finances aren't ours.
Yeah.
I mean, they are God's. That's probably one of the toughest lessons I've learned in the last 3 years of being a missionary is that, it's my bills are going to be met. I may not know how they're going to be met, but somehow they're met. And I think part of it is by honoring God, and the finances are provided.
Sure.
And this first 2 years of learning that, it was, okay, what do I have to do to meet the needs of my finances?
Yeah.
Do I have to get a second job? Am I going to have to stop being this missionary, not knowing where finances are coming from, and actually work a job, and be fully dependent on God and His resources? It has changed a lot.
Sure.
It's not such a worrisome.
And I think you hit it right on the head. Honoring God with our finances starts with our mentality, our understanding of God, and our trust in God. And it really becomes a heart issue, because I don't think God's never at a point where He absolutely needs my few dollars.
Yeah.
I mean, God could, like the multiplication of the bread and fish, God could, He could produce money if He needed it.
He is the stimulus package.
But what is He most interested? He's interested that we begin to understand in our finances the heart issue of trust and obedience, and so you nailed it. The mentality of, wait a minute, this isn't my money, my wealth, my stuff. This is God's, and He's allowed me to use it while I'm on this earth, but how will I leverage that for His use?
Yeah.
And understanding that the source, I just throw in there too, is that no matter whose name's on the check, the source is still God.
Yeah.
So no matter if it says First Assembly on my paycheck, or if it says First Bank of North Dakota, it doesn't matter. I mean, we have this mindset that sometimes the only time God's providing in ministry is when we're getting it through the church or through our donors.
Right.
The source is God.
Mm-hmm.
What tube it comes through and avenue it comes through and check it says at the end doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's ultimately God's the one who's providing it regardless.
Sure.
And that's always helped me to remember that, because sometimes as a pastor you're like thinking, well, I wish the church would take better care of me. Well, it's not the church that's taking care of me. It's God.
It's God. Yeah.
He's the source, and if He wants to take care of me through the church and have their name on the check, or if He wants to take it through, whatever you're saying you carry it. It doesn't matter what name's on it.
Yeah.
It's God's the one who provided it.
God providing the
Shake on
opportunity.
Sunday morning.
Yeah, which are okay too.
So I think, as well, being passionate about this topic is really key. In fact, I'm sitting out here today talking to a young man. He and his wife are getting ready to buy their first home, and then the next step is to have a baby. And so he's had it's a learning curve for him.
Yeah.
But I think at the same point too that I didn't grow up in a home where my family taught me anything about finances. My mother had taught all 5 of us kids how to answer collection agents and avoid them. That's how we were living. But my mom was a widow and had 5 kids and worked 3 jobs, and so it was a real tough time. It was lean for us.
Yeah.
But now I feel like, being such an advocate for getting your financial house in order, and people, I've got a buddy of mine right now, and he's older than I am, but he's a single dad, and I'm at a high school football game with him the other day, and he's unemployed, getting unemployment. He's buying a 50-50 raffle ticket, and I just took note of it. I thought I got to have a conversation with him and talk a little bit about some things with him, and say, there's a way God wants to bless you, and there's some things that you could be doing to hinder that. So I look at one of the things about honoring God too is, as I've learned, just like I think as a parent, you said, hey, I was a kid, I was a teenager, I walked through some baptism by fire things, and we try to instill in our kids. I think the same thing with our finances as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm all about sharing, teaching, and challenging people.
Yeah. I would say as leaders, one of the things that, because we work with churches, our office works with churches all over that deals with finance. One of the things we've found is pastors and leaders predominantly do not want to go to their people and talk about finance. And because they feel like our people have been beat up, misinformation is given, and the minute we talk, they're going to think I'm a sales pitching them or sweet talking them. And what that does is they swing the pendulum the other way to where we won't even deal with godly advice on finances. I mean, God deals over and over and over, like what you just said about stewardship, about the heart, about giving. And when we rob people of learning that, we're basically saying, look, we're not, as leaders, we're not going to teach you how to experience the blessing of God, because we're not going to teach you how to properly deal with money and finance and the heart issue. And so I would just encourage you, in every avenue that you have of leadership and opportunity, don't shy away from challenging people, not just to give, well, we need money for X, Y, and Z, but to really go deeper than that and teach the heart of God for giving to His church, to His bride, to kingdom mentality.
And that's where I'm at. Like, I feel like that's why I'm here, because God's asked me to be a good steward of my money. He always is faithful and always brings enough money for us to pay those bills. But where in my budgeting and my accounting can I make it easier on God, I guess is what you're not really, you know what I mean? Like, where can I free up some money that I didn't even know I could free up, so that I'm more free to give? And that's, like being a good steward of His money. How can I be a better steward?
Sure.
How can I have more education in it and do a better job for our family?
Good. So let me give you 3 things that Robert Morris says about giving, and because that leads us perfectly right into the next focus of what are some practical things we can do. So under the category of honoring God with finance, and we touched on all of them, and I wrote some things down that you said, our heart, our mentality, there's got to be faithfulness, there's stewardship. But this book that I just mentioned, The Blessed Life, the author talks about giving, and he says there's 3 levels of giving that he identifies. And what I love about the book is it's not opinion. He really has researched, and Scripture is all through here. So he says there's the first level of giving is tithing, which you alluded to. We've got to tithe. That's God's command. Give back 1/10 of what He has blessed us with. The second level he calls is offerings. This is where we joyfully then have the opportunity to say, you know what, that really touched my heart, or I believe in 7 Project. I believe in what they're doing. I want to give God above and beyond my tithes. I want to give back to God. And then he calls the third level, which most people don't get to, sacrificial giving. What can I give up, and how will it hurt me to give, but I want to because I want to further God's kingdom. And what he says is most people in our churches, you guys know this, don't even practice tithing. And so we're not even talking with them about how to give offerings and then how to sacrifice. How to sell a car or something and use the proceeds to benefit your church. You think about what could we do for the kingdom if we had people in our community, in our churches, that would practice those 3 levels. We wouldn't be begging for Speed the Light, our missionaries are hurting, come on. We would just be having this giving just flowing in, and we could do more. And so he outlines those are 3 levels of giving to challenge people just to tithe. Really robs them of what else God would ask of us. So great principles, and if you want to really dig in, I encourage. It's a great book. I actually objected to reading the book at first because of the subtitle. It says achieving guaranteed financial results. And I thought, well, I don't believe that. God's just a money maker, factory machine. A bunch of guys in our office started reading and telling me some of what was in here, and I thought, I really need to read this for myself. And I would say that's deceiving, because he deals, the whole book is hard issue, and it's not just about you give to get, which I thought is what he was going for. And but so that leads us into, if the first perspective is we got to honor God with our finances, and I know I don't have to hammer that because we're in that circle where we probably teach that. But the second is what I just call with money is using common sense. And I'm going to give you a whole bunch of things, and I'm going to ask you for a bunch of notes. And let's take, if we Proverbs 17:16, and I love it. It says, "What use is money in the hand of a fool, since he has no desire to get wisdom?" And when I read that, I think if we don't have wisdom in how we use finances, what use is money in our hand? Proverbs is full of talking about fools and their money. And so if we have to use common sense, and I have a whole bunch of things that I think are just practical, that we could take that and go today, and probably it would save us money or help us. But what are some of the things that you have learned in your life, and you've helped your church with money and being the treasurer, but what are some things that maybe any of you have learned that are just using common sense in my budget, my finances? This has done a lot for me to change my picture.
I would say one I know for me is just establishing wants versus needs in my life. People confuse those a lot. And once you really figure out what's a want and what's a need, that's where you start to direct your money. Yeah. And so I know that's, especially my first year and a half of marriage, figured that out real quick.
And and you've had help figure that out.
Yeah, definitely.
It's interesting because if you go, if you go like overseas on a missions trip, all of a sudden that list changes.
Right.
Your wants versus needs. You come back and you think, man, I really thought I needed that. Now I feel guilty. Man, I feel guilty for what I have.
But don't they say that you could, if you look back at your bank account statement and see where majority of your money's going, if a fourth of your income is going to fast food, it shows where your priorities are. Yeah. And I've gotten to a point now where, okay, if here I am, I need jeans, but my son, who is growing up, wants to play flag football. Where's my priority? Well, I want my son to have. So can I go another 3 months with the same old jeans? Yeah, I can do that. And those are things that I just haven't thought about before. And it's also, as we're getting into the discussion of retirement and so forth, it's the same thing. I'm watching my parents, and they're getting to retirement age, but because they've been in ministry and haven't planned properly, it's like they're hurting. And I don't want my son and daughter to have to worry about my wife and I someday of how are we going to make it, especially when we're not going to have Social Security. So
as I was reading through a number of proverbs on that deal with the money issue, and I could have probably printed a whole sheet of them out, but one of them says, a godly man leaves inheritance for his kids. And you know what, that has really struck me, because I've always thought, I don't want to bankroll all this money, which I've never been afraid of all my life, and then just die and not use it. But then that's really has spoken to me. You know what? I don't want to get to the end of my life and be dependent on draining everybody else. I want to be a blessing, and I want to be at a position where I can bless my church and even begin to think of, our office does this all the time. I never thought of it till I worked in our office. All the charitable givings you can designate, if you have money that when you plan to, if you're at the end of your life and you're going to die, you can designate, hey, if there's anything left, I want to go to my church, and I want to go to this, I want to go to church planting and 7 project. And it's just amazing now that I'm seeing the picture that if you have money, it's not about money, but if you have money and you leave it, your kids can be taken care of. I've even been challenged lately that people that have large sums of money that have lived like they don't, but they have large sums of money, they pass away and they leave it to a ministry, say like Seven Project. And they say, I want that whole sum of money to be in an account, and every month I want the interest to fund their ministry. And essentially, it's an eternal source of revenue for a ministry they believe in.
Yeah.
Well, man, that inspires me to go, okay, I want to save for the end of my life, and I want what I've done in my life to go beyond my lifetime. I guess there's something about that principle that excites me. So, let me. I'll go through some of my list, and then you guys just jump in. I put one of the things that we have to do in using common sense is we have to save money and not spend it. Well, we all know we have to spend money to live on, but we have to practice the principle of saving and not spending. It's amazing to me, some people, when they get $50 in their pocket, how quick they are to go, hey, let's go do something. And what they're saying is, let's just go spend it.
Yeah.
Well, my philosophy is, I got $50, man. I'm not spending it on anything. And so we got to get in the mind of saving. I think far too few people in our world save. Our office just got. We're always doing statistics on finances, and one that has always stuck out at me is that for the first time in 2007, the first time in the history of our country, the average family spent over 100% of its income. And the percentage is 103. The average family is spending 103 of their income. And I just thought, you know what? In the history of our country, and now that's been true now for the last 3 years. I just thought, how is this sustainable? Because obviously we know that equals debt. You're spending more than you make, you're debt, and we know that debt just keeps dogpiling and interest rates. And I thought the opposite of that is your expenses. If the expenses are larger than your income, you have debt. The opposite of that is if your income is larger than your expenses, you're saving. And so it's not difficult for us to understand. We just have to be better at saving and not spending money that doesn't have to be spent. And get ourselves into a position where we feel like we're saving money, we're putting it into retirement, we're putting it into a rainy day fund. We're, even as a church, you wouldn't believe how many churches, now that the economy has turned, we're talking with that have said, through all of the good years we had, we just spent a lot of money. We never thought that these days would come. Now we're really, really in trouble.
The story of Joseph.
Yeah, and you think exactly, through the years of surplus or good. I know none of us would feel that way. I don't feel that way about my life, but there are some days I think, if I lost my job tomorrow, I would think yesterday was a really great day. I should have been saving more. And so that inspires me to save and not just immediately spend. I think that's a principle that if we take, we can put ourselves in a better position. I also wrote, we need to make a budget, and then part 2 of that is the most important. We need to stick to the budget. And I don't know how many of you have sat down and penciled out a budget that makes sense. I'm sure, Wes, you have in raising your funds. That's been something that you've been called and asked to do, is submit. Here's how I'm going to live. Here's my budget. If you haven't done that, there's tons of resources, but do it. It's amazing what happens when you get a paper or computer, paper and pen, computer, whatever, and you start writing out, okay, here's all my bills, where's my money go?
Yeah.
It's amazing what that does. Just a visual of, I seem to be making it month to month, now all of a sudden, make a budget. And when you find something that works on paper, stick to it, because it'll work. It's amazing how many times my wife and I have penciled this out. Well, we should have so much more money at the end of our month. Well, then you find out, we knew we had more money at the end of our month, so we bought that or bought this or we did this. We have to get back to, this line of savings means savings.
Yeah. Well, and what's scary is when you actually first sit down and write out your budget, it scares the snot out of you because you realize that you're spending more than what you're bringing in, and that your spending is way out of control, and doesn't go away overnight. I mean, it's a long process to get to a place of saying, okay, here's my priorities, my wants versus needs.
Yeah.
And, to be able to start thinking instead of the here and now in the emotional spending to, okay, that rainy day, it's, for missionaries, we don't get our funds until halfway through January. So how do we pay for our bills? We have to have a month's worth in savings.
Yeah.
And so those are things that you just don't think about it. And, what do they say now? You have to have 6 months worth saved up to live.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they suggest.
Yeah.
And I think the big deception is for a lot of people that they get discouraged about doing the budget is because you look at it and then you're like, or you realize this is how close we are living on the edge.
Oh, sure.
Constantly,
Yeah.
or we are truly a paycheck away from poverty.
Yeah.
Nobody likes to look at that reality. But even like, you got Dave Ramsey here, Total Money Makeover. He talks about, when you make your budget, you're going to have to massage that budget for 3 months before you're truly going to get those numbers adjusted to where they need to be. So it's a process that you go through for it.
Oh, it absolutely is a process.
But it's like a little rudder in a big ship. It takes a lot of pressure, but eventually, when that ship starts to turn, those finances will really start to change in amazing ways. Where you do become suddenly now a giver, where you used to say, "I wish I could give."
Yeah,
That gets to be exciting.
Sure.
So.
My wife and I have just seen the how much of a difference making a budget, sticking to it, means. Because, like I said, I was telling some of you, when we first got married, we were both working full time, making paychecks. We were paying bills, paying debts, trying to get ourselves in good position. But then when we had kids, our commitment was she would stay home. Well, we had to go back to work on budget and sticking to it on a one income, now ministry income. And it was a challenge.
And writing a budget is like they tell you about writing goals. When you write your goal, the probability you're going to hit it is so much higher.
Yeah.
For some reason, when you put a goal down in writing and you look at it on a constant basis, you have a better chance of hitting it.
Sure.
And so the budget's the same thing. You write it down, you have a better chance of hitting it, staying within it.
Yeah. So I would encourage you stick to it, but then monitor. That's the key, is monitoring. And you say it's a process. Just kind of on that, another thing that I would encourage you to do is go back and every month review your expenses. Because for me, when we review our expenses, I don't think much of, that cup of coffee and this thing that, that day was a rough day. I needed that cup of coffee, and then this day I needed that. But you know what? When you put all those cups of coffee over the month together, and you realize, I could have $50 sitting in my pocket right now. If I didn't hit that coffee shop those few times, all of a sudden you have a new perspective on, I'm motivated now not to have coffee this month because I want $50 in my pocket to do something more useful with. And so when you add up your monthly expenses, I did something that is another one of my on my list here, and I would encourage you to do it. I went back through and I began pulling out line items on our monthly expenses, and I said, okay, where did we eat out, and what did that total come to? And I figured out, okay, we ate out here, we ate out there, we ate out here. Here's what it cost, and then I figured, okay, each of those were a meal. How many other meals did we eat that weren't eating out, and what was our grocery bill? And I figured out our grocery bill. When I divided it by meals, eating out, was like it was like $5 per person average or $6 per person average, but our grocery bill per meal eaten was like $1 per person. So when I added up how much we'd spent on eating out, and the difference of, okay, if we wouldn't have eaten out and we would have bought groceries and made our own food, here's how $100 worth of savings that month. It's amazing when you begin to look at those things and you begin to, add up your monthly expenses and look at where your money went. You probably do this at your church all the time. Where did our money go? How can we revise? How can we cut? How can we refresh? You realize there are ways that I can earn more money by not spending it. And it goes back to the needs versus wants.
Have you guys ever looked at themint.com? Have you heard about that? The Mint?
The Mint?
Yeah, I think it's called themint.com. My sister, who's a lawyer, has kind of told me about it, and I haven't looked a ton into it, but I put our family finances into it this last and it does that for you. Basically,
Wow.
it tracks what you do, and then it puts it into all the categories. And probably not super like 100 to the T, because sometimes I have to go in there and what we give to the district for our tithing doesn't come up as tithing. It's like, but anyway, and I thought my budget for groceries was 300, and for the last 2 months it's been 500. And I'm like, are you serious? Just like it totally opened my eyes up to the fact that, wow, I thought I was making it on a $300 budget for food, and all of a sudden I'm, why? And it's all those little grocery trips to the store that, here and there. And anyway, it's just something that is a tool that I.
Yeah, there's software
sure
out
there's
there.
lots of
That's
stuff.
a great website to check out.
What's the website called again?
I believe it's themint.com or mint.com, but you have to put in all your financial information, which some people are not okay with. So definitely.
You have to put in like your bank account numbers and all that?
There's software you can get.
No, there's software like
There's Quicken.
Quicken, is the other one.
There's different things that will do that where you're not submitting it online,
Right.
but you can just put in all your
Quicken
expenses
is
and
another
income,
one,
and then it gives you all kinds of. So I mean, depending how far you want to go with that, but I guess what I've seen is most people don't even think. They think we just made it another month.
Right.
They never even go back and look at their expenses. They never monitor their budget. They don't even know how much money they're eating out or drinking in a cups of coffee. So be aware of those things. As you're aware, those things will startle you and go, wow, I could make an extra $100 a month by not doing this. And all of a sudden, those things don't seem near as important to you. So,
we did with our family. We started to have a conversation, and our kids. And we started talking with finances with our kids when they were about the age of 10, and now 18 and 16. So they're moving through the pipeline really well. But we asked, what's the means our family should live within? And we asked them to help us define it. So now, could we live below our means? Or do we have to live right at our means? Or are we going to be like the Joneses who are living above their means? And I love the saying, you're keeping up with the Joneses to impress a bunch of people who don't care anyway, type thing.
Yeah.
And so we started to instill some things in our kids that, there is a way to live comfortably, but there's also a way to live lavishly that we don't need to. But those are things that will fade in time.
Sure.
What are the things that you could live lavishly with that God wants to bless you with? So, a designer shirt, we would tell our kids, we gave them clothing allowances, and we said, you are going to get a clothing allowance every quarter. It can only be spent on clothes. You can't go buy an MP3 player with it. Undergarments are not optional things to decide if mom and dad, that's the only time we're going to intervene. If you need new ones, we're going to make you buy them, because otherwise a boy will say, I don't need them.
I'm fine.
4 years. But we told them, and you can spend the money however you see fit, but you must go to a Goodwill store type place first and try and see what they have for designer labels, because I knew the pressure was on our kids to want to, in that tank of school, to keep up with everybody.
Yeah.
And my son blew it horribly the first time, bought fancy sneakers and had no money left and couldn't buy clothes for another quarter. But now you go with them in the store and they're like, my daughter's like, I am not paying $4 for a shirt. I want a better price. And I mean, they're really thrifty. Yeah. But that's, when we talk about how we do this, one of the things is we've always challenged ourselves as a family is to live under our means, not at our means.
That's a great principle, because that really can be subjective as what is our means, what's our level of living. Yeah. And I think we can scale it way down. And the fact is, any of us could at any moment if we were motivated enough to scale way back. Yeah.
And we knew that things like a family vacation had a lot more value for us as a family versus movies once a week. So we said, you know what, let's start nesting some money for those things that we as a family find really valuable for us, and that has allowed us to take good vacations.
Sure.
And we wait till something comes out on DVD.
Yeah. Do the $1 red box. Those are great.
Well, I'm going for $1.50 Blu-ray now, but
that's above your means.
I moved it up.
You really stepped up.
But I share with people. We have a network. We call each other. What are you renting? I'm renting. Okay, let's swap tomorrow.
Yeah, before 9. Yeah, before 9. That's great. I put an obvious one. Don't live on credit cards. Pay cash. Credit cards are killer. My wife and I think it was 5 years we were married before we got our first credit card. And even to this day, that's only been, you know, an emergency card. We put things on credit card when we have cash in hand. And if there's ever, you know, an emergency, which by this point in our life we've built up an emergency fund, so, you know, if there's a huge emergency, then we would have to use it. But we've never paid a penny of interest on any credit cards. You know, like I said, when my wife and I were both working, we were paying off debt. And we've worked really hard not to acquire debt, to buy cars, used cars. You know, I can't tell you how many times I've driven around places going, man, I wish I had a nicer car. Look at it, you know, I won't park way out in the back, you know, the back quarter. But I also had the luxury of knowing my car's paid for. You know, and I'm not paying anything this month for my car. I'm just except gas in the tank. And that principle has just been so freeing. And we've tried to live that way in all of life, no debt. You know, now there's times you have to get into debt, or there's calculated debt. You know, obviously our home is one that we've have felt like is investment. But you know, on cars that depreciate, on we want a bigger TV. You know, I mean those become that want versus need, and we just said we're not doing debt for that stuff. If we can't afford it out of our monthly budget, or we can't see a means that we're going to have it in the next few weeks to pay off before 30 days to not get charged interest, we're going to be fine with that. We're going to live below our means. And we're going to realize very quickly that's not a need, that's a want.
Well, you know, and I'm sorry, I was going to weigh in on this too. It's one thing I don't agree with Dave Ramsey, because he says cut all the credit cards up, cut them all up, and I agree, if they consume you, cut them up. But I love making them work for me.
If you can earn points,
love, you know, the Costco American Express card. I love getting that $200, $300 check once a year from them.
Sure.
But I don't pay them the interest. Yeah, and that's the discipline.
And see, that's the key of discipline. Is if you're disciplined, and you can put, you know, something on a credit card and then pay it off, so there's no interest, and get rewards or something out of it. Yeah. By all means, you're maximizing your money.
That's what I loved about American Express, the green card, because you had to pay it off at the end of each month. You know, so it did teach that discipline.
Yeah.
But you still had it for emergency.
In fact, my wife was on the other day. She was. I make her stick her head in the books because she really would be bothered with it. But I said, when I'm not here, you got to know how to push these buttons and make this whole thing run here. And so she's looking over one of her bills. She goes, well, how come this credit card's not paid off in full? I said, because that's 0% interest for 6 months. I said, and I got $60 back if I put $3,000 on that card. I said, but in 6 months, it will be down. And I showed her the statements. I said, there's no interest on any of it. I said, we're getting the $60 check. I haven't ordered it yet. It's still sitting in my, the ultimate reward points from Chase you get? I said, so I'm sitting on these 8,000 points we have. I said, so eventually, and she said, okay. So I'm glad she's holding, I think as your spouse holds you accountable too, because otherwise it's like you can get tempted. You know? It's easy to be tempted to get yourself into trouble. But
oh, absolutely. And that's I think that's the key, is if you use it, you know, use it with payoff or cash in mind. You know, where you're not doing this because we don't have the money, and that's a killer. This may seem easy, but this has saved myself so much money over the years, and it's just simply just shop around. You know, I can't tell you on basic things that probably a lot of services that we all have. On our auto insurance, once a year we go shopping around on quotes. Reputable people, you know, not the guy in the back corner with, you know, a long coat on. But I mean, we get quotes, and you would be shocked how many times somebody can do it for a lot cheaper. And we're like, you know what? We're getting the same coverage, reputable dealer. We're going to be paying less. Why wouldn't we save ourselves that money? That's one where you can shop around. You know, our cable, internet, phone service. I would encourage you to be smart. Don't get into a locked in or a bait and switch kind of deal, but shop around on those things. I mean, there's so much new stuff coming out that there's a lot of competition for that. You can shop around. You can cut your bills. It's just amazing when you begin to shop around. Even so, you're getting down to the needs. These are things we need. Well, let's get them at the best price we can. And that's key. Just keep getting quotes on those things and making sure you're paying the best price there is out there. that'll save you a ton. I put another principle that's just been key in managing monthly, and that's don't buy new, buy used when possible. And this has almost become an obsession for my wife and I. I'm probably almost all of our furniture in our house is beautiful stuff. Almost all of it came from Craigslist. I think the one thing that we didn't, was our couches, because we just didn't want smells and stuff like that. But I mean our table. All this stuff. It's nice stuff, and we snicker when people walk in and go, "Oh, that's beautiful," because we think if they just knew what we paid for that, they would, they would laugh. And I've done stuff on Craigslist where we bought a piece of furniture, and a year later we sold it for a lot more than we bought it for, and bought something nicer. Cars are that way for us too. We've always bought used cars that are low miles, used cars. You drive something off a lot, you're going to be upside down for several years. So whenever possible, buy used. If you can find something used, it's nice. Even my wife, she shops at consignment stores for those, clothes for our kids. And we know our kids are going to shoot out of them within 6 months to a year. We're not buying new stuff and then recycling it. So that's just been kind of a way of living for us. Is we know there's a better price out there, and we're going to go find it. That does wonders on your budget. And other things that you guys have, I've got a few more that I'll mention here, but other things that you've found, and you're just managing your monthly budget and how to rein it in and get it to a point where it's manageable, it's feasible. Again, I think you said it well. We're doing our part in using common sense so that we have more money to honor God when He speaks to us. Because there's nothing worse than being in a service and feeling like, man, I really would love to give to this. I don't even know how I'm eating this afternoon.
If you have a pie that's your household income, and so you got your budget, and there's that portion, and you've got your tithes, and then you're starting to grow in those areas of the offerings, and that is, and typically, you're in that 10% range for your tithe and offering. Is there a percentage that would be normal that you'd be putting away retirement-wise or investment-wise?
Dave Ramsey goes through all that. My wife and I, we've maximized what work will match us with, and then I don't know what the percentages are, but what we've opted.
Let me ask you specifically, in a church setting, there is no matching necessarily,
sure,
or it's very nominal. I mean, I was at a large church, and all they would throw in was $50 a month, no matter what you paid.
Sure.
So, unlike in the secular world, where they'll do like 6% up to anything like that.
Yeah.
What would you?
I think if you're putting 5 to 10% away for retirement, again, there's kind of a calculation rate that you can go. It's how many years do you have to retirement? So how aggressive do you have to be? If you're within the 5 to 10 years of retirement, just putting a few percent away is not going to get you there. So it's goal-based, and then working backwards on years is how much you're going to have to put away.
Are there online tools or places?
Oh, there's all. Yeah, there's. And I should have brought a bunch of stuff. Actually, if I give you my email, if you want to shoot me that, I'll find a bunch of stuff and
you used
send
to have
it
a
to you.
CD that you could put in. You guys still do those? You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, you guys sent out this might be
Software?
5 years ago. There was a CD that went out. You could put it in your computer and type in how many years you had left, and it would help you figure it all out. Help you figure out if it was moderate
$1,200
or how much you should. It was kind of a risk management CD. I remember, Jeremy, where
I'll look for that.
how much
I've
you were
not heard
willing
of
to
that
risk.
in our office.
Yeah, it was probably 6 years ago that I got it from CEP.
Huh. I'd like to come up with that because I'd use that and hand it out. I think that the standard I think is kind of that 5 to 10%. What my wife and I have done is we wanted to leverage everything that could be matching to be matched, so we did that. And then anytime I get a raise or a bonus at work, we just say, don't give it to us in our check, and we just do it auto deduct. So, the few years I've been at CEP, I've basically set myself on this is our budget. And every raise I get, I don't raise my ceiling of, like you said, my means. I basically say, no, we've set our budget, just put that much more into my retirement. So what I'm trying to do is inch that up and up and up and up to where like we talked about, get to the end of my life, I have something to work with and bless God with, and my kids, my family. That would be good. I'd be glad to send some of that to you and look for that CD.
I think, because I talk to other ministers as well. Typically, there's probably a vast majority of ministers, even in our network, that have not seen raises in 2 years.
Yeah.
They've probably seen reductions.
Yeah.
And cost of living has gone up, or
Yeah.
the expenditures of things go up. So you feel that great pressure, like, how do I squeeze more out of my budget, and still stay on strive,
Sure.
On goal for retirement.
Yeah.
To not, have to move in with my kids.
Sure.
Necessarily.
I know one of the things that I did when I was looking at life insurance policies, my life insurance policy I could use as my retirement as well. So
mine is like that too.
So I not only have my retirement in, which I haven't been paying in because I don't have the budget for the national office and the retirement that I already have there. But I know as long as I'm paying my life insurance policy, not only is it covering accident and so forth, if something was to happen to me, but it's also there in place if nothing ever happens to me. I still have enough to cover my funeral basis, but I have enough to live off of as well. And so the more that I start looking at stuff like that, I'm thinking, okay, how is it going to benefit my wife and my kids if I'm not around? Just did cancer insurance through Aflac, and I pay $58 a month. My kids are covered in cancer insurance until they're age 26. And it's every year that I don't use it, it goes up another $500. And it covers basically what health insurance doesn't cover. And so for me, in the risk that my family has with cancer and what my wife's family has with cancer, it's like, that was a no-brainer,
And see, my feeling is the healthcare costs have really just slowed down our speed at which we were going towards nest egging, because I can't even put my wife in my policy through our church, because just to put her on is $270.
Yep.
My kids are not, but my wife for some reason, and so she had to take her policy out through her employer, which wasn't the best one either.
Right.
But it was a lesser expense, than not having it. That was too much of a risk to not have it. But and every time I look at that money, I'm thinking, and we've done shopping around. We've got our insurance otherwise down.
Insurance is nuts.
Insurance has become a rough world, where there's not a lot of.
Well, USAA, man, I was finally eligible to join them. I'm like loving them now.
Yeah.
Every time I call my other place, I call State Farm, like I'm a homeowner. So they're like, "Who you got?" I said, "USAA." We can't touch them. And I've heard that from 3 agents already. Like, we can't touch them.
Wow. Yeah.
But it's hard to get your foot in the door with them.
Sure.
But,
Good.
So those are some more of my questions that I have. Is like.
Yeah, I think.
Strategy things I can do.
Yeah, let me send, if I can get yours, and we'll swap emails, and let me send you some of those, because there's all kinds of calculators and
plans
things like
that CEP offers.
Yeah,
I don't know if you have, but that might be helpful to some of us too.
Yeah, we offer, your traditional and Roth, IRAs for retirement, but then the minister's retirement account that we offer is a higher percentage. I think it's at 5%. It's a straight 5% per year, which is a minister's retirement account. And we encourage that. That is made to work where a minister can put into his own retirement. What we highly recommend, and we know churches don't always do this, but what we highly recommend is that a church puts that money into that retirement account for its pastor staff. That's how it's set up. Like I said, you can open that and just put money into it. But that's designed to be a tool that is getting interest. Again, it's not tied to market stocks, any of that. It's just out of our office. That's a 5% interest rate for money that's there annually. So that's become real popular with our churches. It's the kind of thing that the program, we have a information packet that goes to the church. It has to be presented at a board meeting. Once it's adopted, it's signed and can be auto-deducted, from the church, from the pastor's paycheck, or, submitted straight from the church. And churches have options then as far as, what level. That's where it comes down to. And that's what's so difficult right now in this season of economy we're living in, is churches are looking for every possible way to shave their budgets, to live within their means. And sadly, pastors are taking pay cuts and working outside jobs and shaving their retirement and their savings. And, there's been a lot of drastic measures because in some churches, just the economy has really caught them. So,
Well, we see that this weekend. I mean, we see pastors here with other spouses. We also see couples who've been here in the past. I think that has to do with when churches cut budgets, they cut ministry enrichment.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just
Sure.
It used to be a blessing, and you just saying we got to cut somewhere. It's either your salary or your ministry enrichment. You tell me.
Yeah.
So.
One thing I would encourage you to do too, and this is kind of my last point here on some common sense that we can use, and that is to use some kind of financial advisor. And that could be a professional advisor that you pay, or it could be somebody that you trust in looking at your finances and saying, how do you see that I'm doing? What are you seeing? And Brian, I don't know if we have people that are connected to the district or recommendations. We don't, because we're working with churches, we're not doing this as on personal budget, so our office isn't providing that service. There's all kinds of places you can go to get trusted sources, but even sometimes I know just to find a pastor that has a good handle on their budget and say, would you sit down and show me what you've done? Would you look at and I've done this before, and it's been hugely beneficial to someone that's a trusted friend that knows how to manage their finances, to say, would you look at what we're doing and tell me what you see? And sometimes just that financial advice of, well, here's what I would do, or here's some thoughts, can be greatly helpful. But if you have somebody that's planning and advising and giving you advice, I think that's key. Because sometimes we fall prey to our shortcomings, and we don't see that daily coffee cup is costing us a lot of money, and we need someone to say, you know what, how would you be cutting back your coffee?
Well, see, I think part of that paradigm shift in our head, because when I told you we were those 5 kids avoiding collectors for my mom, finances were an embarrassing thing.
Yeah.
And so I've always grown up like, okay, that's very hush. We don't talk to people. And I've lived in this bubble of ignorance for a while where I didn't ask people for advice. And I didn't want to seek anybody's input because I always thought, if I'm asking someone about financial advice, it means they're going to think I'm ignorant about finances. But now I'm finding more, it's like networking for your job or your career. The more people you talk to, the more pools of advice can be, the better your decision can be about things you're doing.
Yeah.
So, I agree.
And there's some local pastors here in our state that I know have provided that themselves, doing that for their people. They have a good key on finances. They've offered to the people in their churches, hey, if you're struggling, I'll be glad to sit down with you and look. And God has used them in a lot of powerful ways. So just to make you aware, these blue packets, if you wanted any more information on our investments or retirements or anything like that, we offer a lot of that personally. If you wanted that, there's a little tear-off card on the back you could fill out, give to me, or just drop it in the mail. It comes to our office. We'll send you all that information. But
I have one more question for you.
Yeah.
Before you, do you think my biggest thing is just to be open? I hate that I'm the only one in my family that does the finances, and Andy is that's just not his strong point at all. At all. It's like a very big struggle for him, and he had to do it when I made him do it for the 3 months when I had my son. And as soon as he was done with 3 months, it went straight back to me because he hates it. And so I actually today was talking to him after getting out of the meeting with Joy and saying, we need to sit down and go through something together, because me sitting down with the budget and just showing him and being like, he's like, oh, good, okay, bye. I have this book and I have the fourth book also.
Yeah.
But is there a better thing to go through? Is there? I know that there's some stuff out there, but does anybody have any ideas how to get your spouse more
Well,
involved?
I think in my situation, because I was kind of the same way, it's like, I'll just bring home the checks. My wife can take care of the bills. I don't want to have to worry about that kind of stress. I got ministry and so forth. But with my wife's health, her cognitive and so she was missing bills, and I get calls from collectors, and I'm like, well, we haven't paid this in 3 months. I know we have the funds, and so it got to a point where I had to be more involved, which I hated. And then that struggle of, okay, she's always been in charge of finances. How do I just jump in there and take it away? And so it was a rough adjustment for a couple years there. But it was, now it's gotten back to the point where I could trust her with the bills. So I just, having to be involved in some ways of saying, okay, this is what we got. This is the bills that we're having to pay. I don't know. In some ways, it's communication, but it just takes time. I mean, I did not want to look at bills at all. That was the last thing I wanted to do.
You were forced to do it. As of right now, Andy's not forced. You know what I mean?
That situation.
But it's a lot of pressure when, like, if I miss a bill or if I'm late on our mortgage, then it's back to me. Like, oh, we just got a penalty because of me.
At that time, it was like, oh my word! If something was to happen to my wife, I have no clue where the bills are or what we're paying, what credit cards are out there. And that fear of how am I going to take care of my kids financially, and not screw them over 4 months from now if something was to happen to my spouse.
For me, I mean, and that was similar. The first number of years, my wife just handled it all, and I had no idea.
Yeah.
I just knew we were being taken care of. I was doing my work, paychecks were coming in, bills were being paid, we were okay. But there were a lot of things that. I don't want to say forced, but made me get more involved. But even at this point, my wife still deals with all that. But what I've become more inclined to do is say, wait a minute, some of it's just a sense of responsibility. As head of my home, how am I going to be head of my home if I don't even know what's going on in my home? It just kind of hit me as a sense of responsibility that. Even though she's still doing a lot of the bills, the paying, we have regular check-ins where we sit down and say, okay, how are we doing? Where are we going? And and then I have a lot of questions too through the month. I'll say, hey, what does this month look like, or where are we at with that bill, or with this payment, or with this savings? And then we'll sit down and we'll kind of begin to work back and forth. It wasn't always like that. It was like, hey, do we have anything in savings? Do we even own a savings?
Why didn't my debit card work?
Yeah.
Dave Ramsey, and for my wife and I, she was. He talks about there's probably two types of people in the marriage. One is the controlling person. The other one's the free spirit. One's like, I just want to go out and have a date. The other one's like, I don't think we can afford it. And he talks about those in there. And we decided that we would attend Financial Peace, and we did. And we both got charged up, and it spoke volumes to both of us, even though we were on two different sides of the fence about things.
And I've heard that about that Financial Peace University, a lot of Dave Ramsey stuff. I think when people get the vision of what could happen, I think that's when you get fired up.
And that's what
called
he does.
Financial Peace University.
Yeah, FPU. You can look it up online, find a church, but we started teaching it.
A lot of churches offer it.
That's what I was asking. I know there's programs out there, and I mean...
That's the latest and greatest one right there that's happening now.
DaveRamsey.com has that and the Total Money Makeover stuff.
And he has online schools for budgeting.
And probably what
tracking
Jory was talking about, and just in the life coaching. I know when I got excited about focusing on those areas in my life and in coaching, especially with finances of, okay, here's the goal, but this is the small little baby steps I have to take. I had to communicate that with my wife, and then which I found I was also teaching my son, that's $50 for a Nerf gun. We don't have that money, and so, because that is a little expensive, so it was, the more I got excited about saving money and looking towards the future, the more my wife was. And the more that she wasn't, I need a Diet Coke, so I'm going to Dairy Mart and buying 6 Diet Cokes.
The nice thing is this fires up both personalities. The person that's just, I got to go by the books and I got to see it work out and I want to analyze. it works because you do that. And the free spirit person, like you mentioned, it works for them because when they realize, hey, by taking care of business, I can be freed up just to not worry about, oh man, we're at the end of our rope and we're in trouble. And they can be the free spirit because they've taken care of business. I think it speaks to both, and that has been a good. And the reason I love Dave Ramsey is because he outlines it simple. It's hard in the fact that it takes a lot of discipline. But it's simple. It's not difficult if you're committed to the steps. So, Brian, would you? Any other questions we can take? But would you just close us in prayer? I know we need to go, and if there's any conversations,
you talk. We don't have anything else going on now until 6.
I'll hang around.
I would just add, I brought Jeremy here for we asked Jeremy for a couple reasons. One is because we know him, and he's a friend, and he's part of the network, credentialed minister. But I believe in CEP. I mean, I didn't bring him here and not believe in it. I have my retirement with them. I have money that I've put in there. We have a house in Bend that we couldn't sell that we rented. We put income in there that helps us pay that every month. We get 5% from you. I mean, you couldn't get that anywhere. And so I just say I believe. I'm not just trying to sell you something that I don't believe in. These guys are great. I'm not trying to sell you anything. But if you're not thinking about retirement, you're not thinking about savings. These are our brothers, and the people who sit on the board are superintendents. All of our
the superintendents, yeah.
I mean, who else do you want worrying about your retirement? You know, these are godly men.
And the money that's there is working in our Assembly of God churches.
Yeah.
It's financed Assembly of God churches. So the interest they're paying us is going to pay you the interest. So the thing, and I appreciate that because I've tried to be real. I didn't come here to be a salesman and say, everyone needs to buy our stuff. But I do too. I really believe in what we do. The thing that I love, the investment account I love the most is called an access account. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of our money. That's where our savings is because it gives you 3% a year, which isn't huge, but it's an account, and as the name, you have access to it. So it's liquid.
Liquid access.
It's not a CD where it's locked for 18 months. I can't touch it. It's an access account where at any time I could call and you don't get it that day, but you have to give advance notice. We ask for 30 days advance notice, but if I know, hey, next month I'm going to need some money, and in an emergency case, our office does respond. It's nice to know I've got liquid money should I need, but it
locks it up on impulse items.
It locks it up on impulse items, and it's earning interest.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, it's comical, and I'll pray. But I just say this because you said the interest. It's comical because we got money in there, and I actually get interest. I got a savings account in my bank, and I'll get my interest, and it's almost annoying because it's like 2 pennies.
Yeah.
It's like, why do you even give it to me?
Why do you just say no interest?
Yeah.
They send you a 22-cent stamp statement.
You have to put it
that.
on your taxes, 22 cents earned.
Wait till the end of the year and give me all 25 cents at one time. You know what I mean? It's like, come on, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But Jesus, thank you for the wisdom that Jeremy's brought. Thank you, Lord God, that you're our source, you're our provider, and we do want to honor you with our money. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you for listening to the 2010 Fusion Podcast. For more information on the Oregon Ministry Network and our events, please visit our website at oregonag.org.